Good morning, everybody. Look at that. I've got the intro playing. You heard the music, and I'm just sitting here just listening. Good Saturday morning to you. I am really excited. Let me tell you. So long time ago, when I began my career in college, and before then in high school, I was fascinated by the world of mental health, by the brain and how we process things, and how do we process things on a logical versus emotional, because that's our creative nature, right? We have to balance things with logic, and emotion always plays into our decision makings and how those things happen. And it just really fascinated me that I wanted to go into the path of becoming a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Now, life has taken me a different way, and I'm very, very happy for my path, and I wouldn't change anything in my path. It's made me who I am today. So we always have to be grateful and happy for where we are today, because tomorrow is a miracle, right? It's a miracle that we're here this morning. So I have a great guy who has spent tons of time in the field, who is multi-certified. And we're going to get to him in just a moment. Before we get to our guest who is connected, I want to shout out to our sponsor. My sponsors have been so good to me over the years, and Neuro Mint and Neuro Gum. I have them right here. I had some Neuro Mints before the show, and this is a really, really interesting product because not only is it caffeinated, not only does it get you up and going, but it has a lot of your very valuable B vitamins. B vitamins are so necessary. My daughter, she has a blood disorder, nothing major, but she was so listless, and she went to the doctor, and she's like, I'm only 20 years old, but I can't get out of bed. And one of the things they found was that she was deficient in B vitamins. So she started taking some super B complex, and man, she's back. She's back. She's rocking and rolling. It's amazing what our body needs that we're not getting through nutrition. So to spotlight Neuro Gum and Neuro Mints, our sponsor for today, get energy from great taste and convenience in one product, small enough for your pocket and large enough to find in the busiest of bags. So look, this is how big it is. And there's so many mints in here. This is going to last you a really long time. Functional gum and mints to energize, calm, and focus you in the moment. 40 milligrams of caffeine. So one of these little mints is half a cup of a traditional cup of coffee. B6, B12, and natural amino acids for focus and clarity. Refresh your state of mind. You can purchase this at getneuro.com. I'm going to bring up their information right here so that while I'm speaking about it, you can write it down and go find them. It's getneuro.com. That's GETNEURO.com. They're available also at GNC, Walmart, and my favorite, Amazon. So they're great. Let's talk about the stocking stuffers. I don't want to say it too loud in case you're watching with the kids, because this show is definitely family friendly, especially this morning. And all right, so there you go, getneuro.com. Thank you so much for sponsoring the show. I'm going to leave their information scrolling at the bottom while I introduce our next guest. He is live connected with us from Atlanta. And all right, so his name is Terell Tepper. He is LPC, NCC, CAMS2 licensed, right? We're going to get into what all that is. And he has been in the mental health field since 2007. He works hard to cultivate the mental and emotional well-being of youths and parents of youth with therapeutic intervention. He has certifications and expertise in anger management, impulse control, trauma, depression, cognitive retraining, anxiety and self-care, as well as physical fitness training, which aids him in acknowledging and attending to the link that exists between physical and mental health and well-being. And it truly does. I love the endorphins that you get from a good workout. I really do. He is one of the co-hosts for newly developed show called Rewired, where the three mental health experts dissect topics such as co-parenting, vaccinations and free thinking, self-sabotaging behavior, and so much more. And without any further ado, I'd like to welcome to the broadcast Terell. I want to call you Terrell. It's Terell Tepper. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. I'm so glad that you have a moment in time for us here at the show. I would love to understand more about all the certifications I rattled off in the very beginning. So LPC, NCC, CAMS, and I'm assuming that's CAMS too. What are
Yes.
those licenses and certifications, and how'd you get started?
Okay, so my licenses, LPC stands for Licensed Professional Counselor. That's what you get once you graduate from graduate school. You complete your supervision hours, which is similar to a medical doctor doing a residency, where they practice under a licensed doctor's license number until it's like it's similar to an internship. Then you go back and pass the certification test, and then you are considered LPC in Georgia, licensed professional counselor. That's the designation for that. NCC is nationally certified counselor, and what that designation is like a network that's outside of just the state that you're licensed in. They give you information about seminars, learning opportunities. The counseling field is one that is a ever learning population, so you have to continue your learning and evidence that with your continued education hours. So you have to do that to maintain your license, and the nationally certified counselor designation gives you more opportunities to do that. The CAMS is a certification for anger management, and it's certified anger management specialist, which is the CAMS designation. And that is a specialized certification that allows you to work with individuals who have maybe legal charges around anger issues, and a lot of times they get mandated by the judge or whoever it is that's setting up their probation to receive specialized anger management counseling. So
Mm.
what that is. And then the two designation is because you don't have to be a certified mental health therapist to get the anger management certification. But if you are, there's like a special designation to kind of indicate that you're a mental health therapist as well.
What was the first one? I'm assuming LPC is the first one that you achieved. And then
Yes.
how did you decide where you want to go within the field of who you wanted to help?
That is actually a good question. I say this all the time. I think a lot of times the role or the niche that you fall into chooses you more so than you choosing it.
Mm.
Um, so once I went to school initially on a football scholarship. Well, actually, I was on an academic scholarship, but I was on the football track because I was playing football, and I didn't take the football scholarship. I took the academic scholarship, but I was still playing football. So I was encouraged initially not to choose a major. So I was taking all of the prerequisite classes that you have to take, no matter what major you choose. And the major that I was going to choose, which was more like a sports rehab thing, because I've always kind of been into the connection that happens or that's necessary for you to operate at your full potential physically and mentally. My brother, I have an identical twin brother who's also a host of the Rewired show. He was kind of into the mental realm, and I was going to do the physical realm. So the end goal was to have a holistic health facility at some point where we can kind of marry those two worlds together. But
Mhm.
ironically, my major lost its accreditation at my school. So um, it was kind of like the second best thing
Mhm.
initially. And then I guess in hindsight, it was a blessing in disguise that it happened that way.
Wow. So your brother, now I noticed the name of Tewann Tepper
Uh-huh.
and Terell Tepper. I'm like, okay, these guys have got to be related. Your mama gave birth to two angels. I mean, what you're doing in the community is huge. And my goodness. So let's take it before we get to the podcast and we start talking about Rewired.
Okay.
Tell us, what was your journey up to the podcast of Rewired?
Oh wow, that's a good question as well. Okay, so I tell people a lot. I feel like I've been being trained for what I do now ever since I was maybe 7 years old.
Mhm.
My mom was murdered when I was 6. I then went to live with my grandmother, and my grandmother was just a naturally nurturing, naturally genuine. I don't want to say was is,
Mhm.
but what I witnessed growing up, she owned a beauty salon, and beauty salons and barbershops are kind of like the unofficial counseling office in a lot of the inner cities. So I saw a lot of people who opened up to my grandmother, who felt comfortable talking to her about stuff that they wouldn't talk to most people about. So I saw that, and I feel like I kind of embodied that as I grew into my own path and chose my own course in terms of what I do for a living. But I guess to go a professional route and not so personal, when I went to college on academic scholarship. I was playing football and everything. My initial major lost its accreditation, so I went with psychology. And after undergrad, moved to Atlanta and started working as what was called a family advocate at a in-home counseling and therapy agency. And what that is a person that supports the therapist. So let's just say if you're a client of mine,
Mhm.
um, and you have signed on with the agency, a therapist will come out and do an initial assessment and see kind of what's going on. Then either that therapist or another therapist will take on the case and on an ongoing basis, but they'll have what's called a family advocate, which is a bachelor's level person that kind of helps with the skills building that supports the processing that the therapist does.
Okay.
So, for instance, of you and your therapist is processing depression, and
Mhm.
your therapist suggests certain breathing activities to help you kind of calm down when you're feeling down, then the family advocate, which is what I started off as, will actually work through those breathing activities with you. So that's what I started off doing. And what I realized was that I actually had I think, a special skill set to work with the people that I was designated to work with. Um, what I realized is a lot of therapists, when they are too rigid or maybe too by the book or not relatable to the client, a lot of times the client puts them in a box of people that is talking at me and not to me,
Mm.
or a box of people that wants the best for me but only through their lens or their perspective. They don't really understand my struggle.
Mhm.
So I think what my skill set lent itself to was being relatable to the client, somebody that could penetrate past the barrier that most people get stopped at. Because again, I'm only gonna let you in so much because you don't really understand my struggle.
It seems
Um,
like you picked up on a lot of natural skills that your grandmother exhibited through her business at the barbershop.
Definitely, definitely. And I think that um it's a skill set in itself to not forget the things that make you relatable to others as you go through your education and you gain expertise in certain areas.
Mhm.
Um, and it's not just in counseling. I mean, a lot of successful people, I think they forget how to be relatable to others in the process. So one of my things is trying not to fall into that category,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to talk to anybody, learn from anybody, allow anybody to learn from me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but working with kids and adolescents, they will tell you quickly if they not feeling you. They don't have the filter that adults have, where the adults might sit through a whole session
Mm-hmm.
and, internally know that this is not necessarily working for me, but
Right.
I'm gonna be cordial and I'm gonna pay my money and I just won't answer the phone the next
Mm-hmm.
call to check in. But a kid is gonna tell you straight off the top, like, I'm not feeling you. It feels like you're reading from a piece of paper,
Right.
um,
Mm-hmm.
and it don't feel personal, so I'm not gonna talk to you. So um, it allows you to be genuine
Mm-hmm.
and not be so I guess scripted in therapy.
And I don't believe that we should be scripted in anything. Of course, unless you're filming a movie, then yeah, maybe you need to be scripted. But even with that, I believe everything that we do, it's a disservice to, in my opinion, our creator, if we're not real every single day. And it's really hard to put yourself out there and be real. I have a question for you about kids and mental health. What I'm noticing just as a parent of a lot of people, I'm noticing that giving them a cell phone was a huge mistake because there's some emotional stunting that seems to be happening. What are you seeing in the field of working with kids and the social media? And, you look like a really young guy. I'm probably a good bit older than you. But in my world, when I went to school and I was bullied, and um, I could go home. I could go hang out with my friends after school, and it was like it was gone until the next day. These
Mm-hmm.
kids don't get away from it. What are you seeing?
I'm definitely in 100% agreement. It's kind of a catch-22 because I have fallen into the trap of giving the cell phone, and what I was thinking is nowadays it's kind of hard to maintain contact as well as you want to without some type of device. I
Mhm.
think in hindsight, I probably should have just got a plain flip phone or something from Walmart instead of like an iPhone with the internet connection and everything, because I have definitely noticed the resilience
Mhm.
has been impacted. Like, I really don't want to rescue kids from social development. A lot of parents jump in every single time they have a conflict with a peer, or want to like mediate every time there's an issue, like an interpersonal issue. I don't feel like that's going to lend itself to development of social awareness and social intelligence. But I do feel like the exposure that the kids have nowadays to adult content through
Mm.
the internet
Mhm.
is something that I think it causes a lot of confusion in the youth. It causes a lot of confusion in terms of what's real life versus what's fantasy.
Right.
How can I feel confident in myself if I don't look like this person, or
Mhm.
if I don't have the things that that person has? And I actually I find myself talking about this a lot with my own personal situation. Like, I never knew what the inside of Magic Johnson or Michael Jordan's house looked like. So I wasn't envious of those things. The only people I knew was the people who was in my neighborhood.
Mhm.
So the pressure to like keep up with people that I didn't know was not there like it is for the youth now. Like, I talked to my daughter, she tells me she wants a Corvette for her first car.
Uh,
I'm like, that's not even realistic. Like, who do you know with a Corvette? You don't even know grown people driving those cars. And
Let me ask you a question on that point, because same here. I have a daughter who I've been fortunate enough to be able to provide a modest car for her to be able to go to college. But,
Uh-huh.
it's leased. The lease is coming to an end. And she's like, I want the brand new, fully loaded pink Barbie Jeep. And I'm like, no,
Oh yeah, no.
no, like that's not happening. And they get so emotionally invested in this fantasy that it's like they can't process a no. Like that's unattainable.
So true.
How do you deal with that?
Well, what I got a favorite saying about no. Saying no is gonna teach you more than hearing yes. So
Mm,
if you hear no, you look for alternatives. You are forced back to the drawing board, and you're gonna learn something from that no. If I continue to say yes to you, then you stay comfortable. You're not forced to adjust to anything. So it's a learning thing. I'm doing you a favor. Whether you know it or not, in the long run, you'll thank me. Maybe you don't realize it now, but I'm doing you a favor by saying no. I definitely agree with what you're saying. My only hope really is that she'll have an experience similar to the one I had. Because when I was growing up, I remember hearing a lot of good advice that I did not recognize at that point in time was good advice.
mm,
Um, and I can literally hear my parents in my head now when I'm about to make a decision, when I'm struggling with a situation or scenario, or even when I feel slighted by somebody, and my initial thought is how can I get back at them, or how can I make them feel the same way I feel. I often hear my grandmother's voice in my head when
mhm.
those scenarios happen. So my my hope is that even if it's not registering now, if I keep giving the right messages or what I think is the right messages, eventually they'll make more and more sense to her as she gets more and more mature, and she sees some things for herself in her own life. Because that's kind of how my experience was. Like when I see things play out, and I say, okay, I remember hearing that as a lesson growing up, but it only started making sense when I started seeing it for myself. So
I love that. I typed that out, and that's up on the screen right now, talking, right? What we're talking. I'm constantly typing in things, wonderful pieces of wisdom and free counseling that you're giving to us. Thank you very much. Saying no is going to teach you a lot more than a yes. I love that. That is going to resonate with me. We have a couple of people watching. I have a question, and I have Michael Schwartz. He has a statement here. He's saying, I must have been the old-fashioned slash mean parent. I had 6 kids and didn't allow them to have a cell phone until they were 18. I I would too, in the world of co-parenting and parenting with a spouse, I lost the battle of that one. So they did get it, but as I have younger ones coming up, we're pushing it later and later and later because we're seeing the downside of giving it to them when they turn, in our house, it's been when you turn 13. I still think that's too young, especially what you were touching back on. If you've missed the content, back it up in post-production once it's out there. If you're watching on Binge Networks TV or on Amazon Fire TV, you can always watch that and really listen to what you had said about cell phones and kids and the envy mode that everybody gets when they're watching this fantasy life on social media. Now, I have a question from a viewer, Carl. Carl is saying, and let me read it off to the side, so bear with me. I have a son who is autistic, hold on, let me back it up just a moment. Sorry. I have a little button that's right over a very important word. I have a son who is trying to deal with a cousin's bipolar episode who said a lot of hurtful things to him, and my son is dealing with a lot of anger towards him. My son has an appointment with a psychologist on the 28th, but I'm trying to help him through things until then on. How do I deal with stuff with his cousin?
so the cousin is the one that has the bipolar diagnosis, correct?
The cousin is the one that has the bipolar. I believe Carl's son is the one that's being picked on by his cousin. He's saying, how do I deal with that until we get to our appointment later in the month of December?
Okay, so I would say that appropriate expectations would go a long way with the son and his ability to deal with the cousin who has the bipolar diagnosis. A lot of times what happens when you are dealing with a family member who's been diagnosed with a mental health disorder as serious as that one is they function highly at times. So if you're not educated on their diagnosis, then you can expect them to function that highly all the time. But what the diagnosis indicates is that there's extreme highs and lows, meaning that those highs can give you an unrealistic expectation of what the behavior would look like going forward because you're not aware of the lows until it's upon you, I guess you could say. One thing I would do, probably if I was him, is help his son to get educated on what type of behaviors are typical for those with that diagnosis. If the son has different expectations, it's just like if you go into a middle school basketball game, you're not going to expect it to look like an NBA game. If you went to an NBA game, you're going to have a high expectation. You're going to want that field goal percentage to be high. You want to see some dunks, some good passes. You want to literally be entertained. But if you go to a middle school game, you're going for support. Like you're not thinking that they're going to, wow you with their talent. So I think appropriate expectations would definitely go a long way. And you won't have those as a typical teen that haven't been directly exposed to, that type of information. But the good thing, I guess, about the day and age that we live in is he could just type in a Google search, bipolar disorder, typical behaviors. And the more he reads, I think the more of a realistic expectation he'll get from this person that he's having to interact with.
I love that. So if anyone wants to get in touch with you, possibly they would like to acquire you as a counselor, as a psychologist for their child, I have the email scrolling at the bottom. And how else can they contact you if they have any questions and they would like to clinically ask you?
Okay. Well, I'm actually setting up a Psychology Today page. That is a database that has licensed therapists and some people that are just certified specialists that's not licensed therapists, that they have their personal way to get in contact with them. It's not currently set up because I'm trying to revamp a couple of things, but I plan on having it done by Monday.
Okay.
But once it's done, my name will be Terell Tepper on there. I'm not going to do anything exotic. It's just going to be my first and last name. But until then, I can give my email address,
Okay.
my social media handles, and I don't have a problem taking cell phone calls. I don't know how appropriate that is on this platform.
Well,
but
the email address that I have loaded is SamaritanAtlanta.org. That email that we have, is that the best email to contact you? I think email might be more appropriate than cell phone since this is broadcast worldwide.
Definitely. Okay, let me do my personal email as well. My personal email is t_tepper37@yahoo.com.
Okay, there it is, everybody. I just put that into the chat and I'm going to bring it to the stream. There it is. So if you have questions, if you would like to book time, are you a face-to-face person or do you have some clients where you're Zooming with clients as well? Or if they're in California, they can still feel like they can contact you?
Yes, definitely. I have, in the state of Georgia, we have had to get a certification for telehealth. And I am a certified telehealth provider. So we don't have to do face-to-face. We could do Skype or FaceTime or, anything that is virtual. I'm certified for that as well.
That's wonderful. So everybody, if you're only listening to the show, the email to directly contact Terell Tepper is T_T_E_R_E_L_L TEPPER37 @yahoo.com. And so take me through the year of 2020, because I'm assuming something happened in 2020 between you and the other two co-hosts that you have for the brand new show, Rewired, which is taken off. I mean, you guys, we're going to get into some of the topics that you talk about, but what happened in 2020 that brought all three of you together and said, we need to be a resounding voice that's reaching people?
Man, that is a great question. What didn't happen in 2020?
Right.
I think what really happened, honestly, was we had so many conversations that was internal that we all agreed needed to be heard by more than just us. Um, in our communities, we have, and when I say our communities, I'm referring to the Black community, I'm referring to the pop culture, I'm referring to media, social media. We have a tendency to highlight the things that are negative and more entertaining. But we don't talk a lot about the things that might actually make a difference in generation that's currently kind of navigating life, and the future generations, because a lot of the things that we deal with are the same things that our parents dealt with and the same thing that their parents dealt with, and it becomes a generational curse until you take an active role in doing something about it.
Yeah.
So in my walk through my professional development, I've been able to touch people on an individual basis.
Mm-hmm.
Like if me and you is talking, maybe 2 or 3 months down the line, you might say to me, I can't even imagine what path I would be on if we hadn't started talking. So my thought is, the more people I could reach and the more people I could and it's not about just me learning from them. I mean, them learning from me, I'm learning from them as well. I went through, the COVID thing, and the anxiety and depression of feeling like you don't know what to expect from day to day, just like everybody else did. And what I realized was that my own therapy happens when I'm processing with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these episodes have been somebody that was close to me needed to hear this. Maybe I needed to process through this, or one of the other co-hosts had feelings about a certain situation and they needed to process through some things, or we just see a pattern of behavior that we feel like won't change until somebody talks about it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how it came about. What I got a circle of friends and group chats going around, and we always talk about current topics and things that's going on in social media and things that's going on in regular media. I said to myself, even the people who disagree with me or disagree with my perception on things, they could still learn something from hearing this conversation. So that's kind of where it came from.
So I have a question. I'm trying to figure out the best place where to put this question, because we're talking about the development, the pre-development of your new show called Rewired, and that started last year. So you've been doing it for a little while, but it is new, and you can watch it on Instagram as well as YouTube. And my question for you, because you hit on something really powerful. Every time you open your mouth, you're hitting on something really powerful, and I'm like, I got to ask him about that. My question for you, since I have a professional at my fingertips, and I can ask someone who's highly licensed like yourself and highly educated, and you've been doing this for a really long time. Our brains want to spend more time on the casualties. If there's a car accident, people slow down to look. They don't know who they are.
Right.
There's nothing that's going to feed into your life that'll bring you to a positive consequence from looking at that accident, or horrible videos that are out there of people getting hurt. what catches our attention and how do we break that cycle?
Man, I think the piece that you just said is so key. Because naturally we gravitate towards certain things. And I think that's largely in part due to the culture around us, due to the things that we have experienced and seen growing up. But the difference between humans and animals is our ability to reason, our ability to make conscious decisions and not just do what's natural or what comes to mind first. So that awareness piece is really the integral piece that you just said. This is not going to feed into anything positive going forward. So I guess the main thing is being aware of the things that I'm being drawn to. Asking yourself, is it something that is positive or going to lend itself to productivity in my life? And then making a conscious effort to either engage in it or not engage in it. So using that same example that you used, I have found myself behind an accident, seeing everybody slowing down to see the gory whatever is going on over there.
Right.
And then I'm asking myself, do I really want to see this, or do I want to just keep driving? You know what I'm saying? So I think that awareness piece is the main thing. And you'll be surprised how little or how infrequently that actually happens. Where you interrupt your natural thought process and say, is this lending itself to positive things in my present and future? Because if it's not, I probably shouldn't be doing it. Like, what purpose is this behavior serving in my life?
It sounds like a fusion of gratitude and self-control, and constantly keeping yourself meditated right there. I love, you're feeding me, you're educating me. I love this.
Definitely. I think that we sometimes in our society, we kind of look down at people who kind of have internal dialogue with themselves, because it's like a stigma, I guess, attached to getting too much in your head. But I think that talking to yourself and talking yourself through situations can be a positive and productive habit. You'll be surprised how many negative and irrational thoughts you can internally confront if you say to yourself, does this really make sense? Like, should I really be doing this?
Right.
And you'll be surprised how little that happens unless you're consciously kind of putting some effort towards it.
I have Michael Schwartz who's watching. He just wrote in. He said, Terell, you are a blessing to your community and influence to the world. Thank you for your abundance of education.
Oh, man, I really appreciate that.
We are reaching people this morning. So I want to continue to reach them. So now we've worked all the way up to starting up Rewired, the podcast. Tell us about the first shoot. What was the first topic?
Oh, man, the first shoot, it was funny because anything you do the first couple of times you do it, you're kind of stumbling through it. So I think it came about because we were in my internal group talking about voting. The very first topic was about voting. And I had some friends who had some real negative and counterproductive thought processes, in my opinion, about voting. And they were saying a lot of stuff that I think was representative of a population of people. So even though I did not agree with their thought process, I felt like addressing their thought process was important in order to kind of redirect or rewire those who kind of feel that way. So one of my friends said, I'm not going to vote because they already know who they want for president. Even the candidates that they have chosen, they probably have the same agendas. So my vote don't count, and I'm just going to, kind of ride it out. Which I disagreed with, but I could see how he could feel that way. And I think that more attention, as I talked more and more to him, what I found out was that he had a legal past, and he felt like his legal past was not going to allow him to vote. But instead of saying that, he rationalized it in his head as my vote don't count, so I'm not going to vote anyway. Right? But what we found out through more and more research is that there has been laws passed since then that allows those with legal pass to vote. It's just a couple of things that they have to do to, I guess, qualify for that right. But he didn't even know that. So I guess the Rewired came in where if you process through a situation, you might learn some things that allow you to attack the situation from a different angle. But if you sweep it under the rug and just kind of make an excuse, and then you go on to the next topic,
right?
Or like you said, you focus on, the latest music video or the latest shoe that came out, or the latest electronic thing that came out, then the important topic never really gets hashed out. So what I realized is the more I learned about the reason why he didn't vote was kind of personal insecurities that no longer exist.
Wow.
So I think it was a good thing that we was able to kind of talk about that.
Well, and I think that's really difficult when we actually have to do a deep dive within ourselves and see the not so good traits, that if we can just get past those, we become so dynamic. We be able to do so much more and expand our minds and understand more. And I really think that's what we're here for. Everybody needs you in their life. We've talked about your background a little bit. We're beginning to talk about Rewired, the podcast. Would you mind introducing your other co-hosts?
Definitely. So like I said earlier, I have an identical twin brother. A lot of people can't tell us apart. But ironically and kind of inadvertently, we got the same major, same credentials. We work for two different agencies, but I actually have twin studies is big in psychology and stuff because of the nature versus nurture argument. But one of my philosophies about identical twins is most of them end up separating in terms of like career path and stuff like that. But it's really to satisfy others and not from an internal place. This is a personal philosophy. This is nothing that's been, published or anything like that. But because we have the exact same DNA code, the things that he likes, typically I like, and vice versa. So to go in opposite directions don't really make sense to me personally, but to each his own. But anyway, he is a co-host as well. The funny thing is we typically have similar thoughts, but different personalities, if that makes sense. Like we typically come from a different angle, and we disagree about a lot. We agree about a lot, but we disagree about a lot, which is, I think, something that adds to the dynamics of the show. The other young lady, her name is Tiara. She works at one of the agencies that my brother used to work for, and she is in her graduate program, I think, right now.
Okay.
So finishing up her graduate program. And I think the thing that I like about her perspective on the show is that she comes from a feminine outlook on a lot of things. Of course, me and my brother, our perception is more, and I think men have more of a tendency to think logically. From a logical standpoint, women are more in tune and adept with emotional reasoning, which I think is both a valuable. They're equally of valuable importance, but yeah, I think everybody lend their own kind of flavor to the show.
So that is so interesting, because there's so many people out there that do have multiples. There may be twins or triplets, especially twins. We hear about the twin speak, where your speech can be a little delayed because you and your brother, or you and your sister, or sister and sister, you have your own chat system.
Yeah.
clue to everybody around you. Like nobody knows what the heck you're saying because you've literally made up your own language. And so many different wonderful things about being a twin. And then you have Tieara Leeann right
Mhm.
in the middle. And I would love to know, how did the show about co-parenting go? What were some of the points in there that surprised you?
Well, one of the things that I took from the co-parenting show, and this is just a personal thing because I'm doing the co-parenting thing with my daughter, but I often wonder how things are being perceived by her and how they're going to impact her going forward. And Tierra grew up in a household where, she was with her dad sometimes and with her mom sometimes. They weren't necessarily together. And it's just interesting to see kind of how it felt receiving love from two different households.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I took from it. I was encouraged though. I mean, I think that the things that I worry, I guess that any parent would worry about is trying to be as consistent across households as possible. Um, not making it feel. And one of the things that I think I was subconsciously afraid of was making my daughter feel like she had to choose sides.
Right.
And I don't want that to ever be the case, or her to have to feel that pressure or feel like, maybe a pawn or, a possession at any point. So, yeah, I mean, that was, again, that's one of them topics that had personal value to each and every one of us. In that we just talk about our personal feelings and experiences around the topic in hopes that somebody can either glean something from it or educate us in some ways.
Now, do you have people that write in to you guys and give you some feedback or maybe comments in the comment section? What has the feedback for the show been like so far?
The feedback has been pretty good. Honestly, most of the feedback initially was I think what we was asking for initially was how can we make this show better, more entertaining, I guess. And the initial feedback that I remember receiving was be a little bit less scripted, because what I was doing was writing down a lot of stuff that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
And when you do that, I think you kind of force yourself almost to read what you wrote. So I was kind of reading a lot.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't do that anymore. I might I might bullet point a couple of things and just talk about my experiences about it. Um, but I did get a lot of feedback about the one show about the body dysmorphia. I don't know if
Ooh.
you got a chance to see that one, but it was really about the wave of plastic surgery that is taking over right now. And I had a lot of people that I guess had feelings or personal experiences about it.
Mhm.
That was reaching out saying things that was, maybe they agreed with or disagreed with, or they had experience, because what I have seen a lot in my community is that um, mental health is typically disguised in our community as something else. And this just happens to be one of the latest things that I see mental health in, that most people don't see mental health in.
Mhm.
Because honestly, there's always gonna be things about your personal appearance that you don't necessarily like. But if your value as a person is tied up too much in your appearance,
Mhm.
then as a mental health therapist, I'm looking at self-esteem.
Mhm.
Whereas the common person, I think nowadays, is looking at how can I get this fixed?
Right.
Like, all right, I need to, have a waist like this and a butt that looks like this, and that type of situation. Which is nothing wrong with wanting to look your best.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't want to, mistake every single person that's had any type of cosmetic procedure done as somebody with self-esteem issues.
Right.
But what I have seen a lot is that once you get one thing done, you're not satisfied with something else, and then you get that done, and now you're not satisfied. So at some point when it's a repetitive thing, you got to look internally and ask yourself, what is it about me
Mm-hmm.
that feels like I have to look a certain way in order to be a valuable, contributing member of society. Like I don't have to, look like the person that's on social media in order to be as good as that person or better in
Mm-hmm.
terms of my total value. So I
Yep.
think, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry to cut you off. A long time ago, I saw a very close family member of mine who struggled with the emotion of jealousy.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat there and I watched at a really young age all the way through. And I'm like, this is a useless emotion. I've got to ditch this. And I have to also understand, I'm related to this person. It's genetic. It's part of my makeup, part of my being to possibly be predisposed to wanting to be jealous. So I'm going to chuck that over to the side. And I did. And I'm glad that I did because it helped my mental health. However, I didn't realize until much later that the chasing the little things you don't like, and it was still a form of that jealousy. It was a form of that self-sabotage, of lack of confidence, lack of self-esteem, not loving yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, and of course, I don't really touch too much on politics or religion on this show, but I will get religious for a moment. I had to put that on God. I had to put the things that drove me crazy, that if I could be tempted to maybe cosmetically fix it, I would. But I'm like, no, 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 this is not right, because you can fix something for the moment, but you've got
Mm-hmm.
to fix it inside for the lifetime.
Exactly.
And I love that you touched on that subject. There's another subject that you touched on, and there again, I don't get too political on the show, and this one seems to have just taken off in a political tangent, but it's within the world of healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
vaccinations. So you have one show that is titled Vaccination and Free Thinking. I have such a high respect for you and what you do and everything that you've been so gracious to share with us today. Would you mind touching on that show and telling us a little bit more about it? And then anybody who would like to watch more of it, go to YouTube. You can search the show Rewired Podcast 2020. It is also on Instagram as Rewired Podcast _, and you can find it there as well. And I'll pop up your logo so everybody knows what to look for. But take us through a little bit of that show about vaccinations and free thinking.
Okay. So the vaccination and free thinking show was kind of centered around the concept of, like I said, a lot of the shows came from like personal experiences and things that one or all of us experienced at some point in time. And vaccination status was a real hot button topic at that point in time, and I think it still kind of is.
Sure.
And what I found out was, what I experienced was, most of the people who had an opinion about vaccination status, they did not have an educated opinion about it. Like, they were kind of just leaning on or relying on whoever their social circle was to tell them whether or not it was safe, whether or not it was a good idea. Um, you know, and it kind of felt like what a professor of mine told me a long time ago in graduate school. 68% of people are sheep. 13% think outside of the box in an more elevated than the norm way, and 13% think outside of the box in a, I guess, lower than average range. But most people kind of go with the status quo, and they kind of go along with whatever is being told to them by the people that's in their immediate circle. So the the vaccination and free thinking connection happened where I was just like, do your own research,
Right.
formulate your own educated opinion about whether or not you want to get involved in whatever it is you're involved in. Vaccination just happened to be what we was talking about at that point in time. But don't just rely on somebody else who probably is just relying on somebody else who is probably just relying on somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Go do some research. I actually had some reservations about getting vaccinated, and I did get vaccinated because I had some business opportunities that was kind of like, you got to get vaccinated if you want to do this. If not, then you know. Um, but I think whether you choose to do it or choose not to do it is less important to me than why. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you got a solid reason that means something to you, great. But if you're just going along with everybody else and you kind of pushing your opinion on people, and it's not an educated, you didn't even come to an educated conclusion,
Mm-hmm.
then to me, you're perpetuating a negative stereotype that you did not even do the due diligence of researching. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? Like if I can understand if you are a scientist and you've been researching this for you know what I'm saying, months, and you got something to lend to your opinion, then
Mhm.
great, spread it, tell everybody you know. But if you just kind of sitting on your couch watching CNN sometimes and flipping back and forth between that and sports,
Mhm.
you don't have an educated opinion about it. So educate yourself first and formulate your opinion. I guess was the main message on that show.
I love what you said there about your why. Your why for why you would do something is not my why for why
Mm-hmm.
I would do something. And, within the world of vaccinations, it has gotten really quite cumbersome. There are people out there. Um, I'm one of them. And, yeah, I'll watch the news and I'm like, man, they're not taking into consideration people who are sick. People, I've been in treatments for a little over a year. So there hasn't been a moment in time where I have the quantity of days from one procedure to the next to be able to safely get vaccinated. So therefore, I'm not. And I wish that we could get that message out there to more people to be understanding that don't give someone a hard time if they don't have what you have because you don't know what their why is. And
Exactly.
I love what you said there. And I've been absolutely in love with this entire conversation. We have gone for almost an entire hour, and I want to thank you so much for your time. I hope everybody tunes into the podcast. When is your next podcast? Can you tell us a little bit about where can we follow the show? How is it advertised?
Yes. So the show is currently on YouTube under Rewired Podcast 2020. On Instagram, underscore Rewired Podcast. We shoot the show every Wednesday. So this coming up Wednesday, we will shoot the show, and the new show will be on Instagram and YouTube on Friday.
Okay.
Um,
Can
So
you
we got a couple of topics that we're toiling over. I don't want to reveal what we're gonna go with yet. But I will say that I think that continuously putting out content is important, but we got, I think it's over 20 episodes that's already on there. So you guys can definitely check those out in the meantime.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for the free counseling that you've given to the world. We have people here that are chatting in. They're saying, thank you, thank you. You're so appreciated. I can't thank you enough. And I hope that you have a wonderful holiday season and have a great day. It looks like it's a beautiful day in the background behind you. So be
It
blessed.
definitely.
Enjoy your entire day. And I'd love to have you back on the show again sometime. Alrighty. That was Terell Tepper, and he is a co-host of a new show called Rewired with two other hosts on there. So it's Tieara Leeann and Tewann Tepper, his twin brother. They chop up some great topics. If you're just tuning in, scroll back. You can watch the whole show. Everybody, I want to say thank you so much for watching the Caffeinated Cooper Show. As always, we are blessed. You are blessed. And I love you. Thank you. And until next time, I will see you later.